that there was going to be 51 states? Well, it turns out there was at one point. Hi, my name is Liam, and today I'd like to talk about the state of Jefferson, the lost state.
2, 3, 4.
So, what is Jefferson? The idea of Jefferson came about in a sleepy Oregon town called Port Orford in 1941. The town's mayor, Gilbert Gable, had an idea. He wanted a 51st state between Northern California and Southern Oregon. He announced this idea to the public that there would be a 51st state and that its name would be called Jefferson. Many thought Gable couldn't be serious, and that the state of Jefferson was mostly a political stunt. Nevertheless, in November of that same year, an ambitious group of young men, armed with hunting rifles, blocked Highway US 99. They stopped oncoming drivers on the highway, enforcing the new state's boundaries, and handing out flyers that announced that the drivers had entered a new state. However, that next day, Japanese forces launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, which united citizens across the country. Unfortunately for Gable, this new sense of unity meant that the 51st state never came. However, in recent years, the idea of Jefferson has somewhat come back. In 2013, California's Motorway and Siskiyou counties declared separation from California along with 19 other counties in the boundaries of Jefferson. So, in a hypothetical scenario, let's say Jefferson became a state based on the 2013 borders. Who would vote in this new state? How could this state even come about? How would this state shape U.S. politics? And what might happen if Jefferson did enter the Union? All these questions I hope to answer.
You state of Jefferson, state of mind. State of Jefferson, that state of mind.
So, first, let's take a look at Jefferson's demographics. According to the U.S. Census Bureau's estimations in 2017, the population of Jefferson would be around 1,815,091 people. This population would make Jefferson the 38th most populous state, outranking West Virginia, Idaho, Hawaii, New Hampshire, Maine, Montana, Rhode Island, Delaware, North Dakota, South Dakota, Alaska, Vermont, and Wyoming. Jefferson itself would be divided into 21 counties, the largest one being Placer, at 374,985 individuals. Jefferson's capital city would most likely be Eureka, California, which was the provisional capital of Jefferson in 1941. Jefferson would be mostly seen as a rural state, its population being much smaller and more dispersed when compared to Southern California. The Jeffersonian counties tend to associate more with the Republican Party. See, looking back at a 2016 election map published by the New York Times, you can see a noticeable divide among the mostly Republican North and the mostly Democratic South. All in all, we expect Jefferson to be a predominantly conservative state with a mostly rural population. This would really contrast with the more democratic, more urban California South. So, now that we talked about who lives in Jefferson, let's move on to talk about how Jefferson could become a state. Jefferson could achieve statehood through the process set forth in the Constitution in Article 4, Section 3, where it states, "The new state shall be admitted by Congress into this Union, but no new state shall be formed or erected within the jurisdiction of any other state, without the consent of legislators concerned, as well as of Congress." That last bit, without the consent of legislators and of Congress, is what Jefferson would need to do in order to become a state. It means that in order for Jefferson to do so, both California's Congress and the U.S. Congress would have to agree to split up California. So this would probably be a hard sell to Democrats. Again, the counties that make up Jefferson are sparsely populated and mostly Republican, whereas the rest of Southern California is mostly Democrat and the ones in power. It would take a lot for the Democrats to allow a Republican state to be carved out of it. I'll talk about this more in a bit. Let's just say for the sake of this scenario, somehow by sheer luck, California's legislature does give their consent, and so does both the House, which is run by Democrats, and the Republican majority Senate, both approve. Congratulations, now Jefferson is the 51st state. Now on to representation. As Jeffersonians start to flag their 51-star flags outside their homes, busy congressmen and women begin to scramble in D.C. See, after Jefferson would be omitted, the legislative committees would begin to reapportion the House. Reapportionment is the reshuffling of House seats to better match the population. It occurs every 10 years with the census. However, since the Constitution requires all states be represented, Jefferson would force this House reshuffling of the 435 seats a bit early. I recommend you watch this video, which explains reapportionment more in depth, but here's the gist of it. See, there are 435 seats in the House, and as required by the Constitution, each state needs to have at least one representative. So subtracting 435 from 51 leaves 384 seats to be distributed among the 51 states. Using this formula and hardcore math, we can determine how many of the 384 seats Jefferson, California would receive. So since Jefferson has a population of 1,815,091 people, we plug that into the equation, then proceed to do some number crunching. And after doing 2 hours of calculating reapportionment seats, the grand total of Jefferson would be 2 representatives. California, on the other hand, with a would-be population of 37,167,756 people, I told you it was a lot larger, gets only 51 representatives. Overall, Jefferson would take a nibble out of California's power in the House, reducing the public's power somewhat. I want you to remember this because it will come up in a bit.
He had traveled near and far while he lived off the land, made his living as a salmon fisherman.
Finding how many senators Jefferson would receive is much easier than the House. The Senate is based on equal representation, meaning that each state is as equally representative as all other states. In Article 1 in Section 3 of the Constitution, the Senate of the United States shall be comprised of 2 senators from each state. Thus, Jefferson would have 2 senators, the same as California, and the same as Texas or any other state. The admission of Jefferson would also affect the Senate. It would increase the number of Senate seats to 102 senators, since 51 states times 2 is 102. Now that we know how many representatives are in Jefferson and how many senators are in Jefferson, we can now determine Jefferson's effect on presidential elections.
You stayed on Jefferson, state of mind. Stayed on Jefferson, that state of mind.
In order to talk about presidential elections, we also have to talk about the Electoral College. The Electoral College is defined in the Constitution in Article 2, Section 1. Each state shall appoint a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in Congress. Since Jefferson has 2 representatives and 2 senators, that means this state would have a total of 4 electors. Also, since the Senate has 102 senators, the number of electoral votes would increase from 538 to 540. As a result, the number of votes needed to win a presidential election, more than 50% of all electors, would increase. Instead of the classic 270 to win, which is found from dividing 538 by 2 and adding 1, it would be 271 to win, which is 540 divided by 2 plus 1. It means that this website would have to change its name. Remember when I said Jefferson would diminish California's power? Well, here's where I talk about it. As of now, California has 55 electoral votes, which is 20% of the votes needed to win an election. Jefferson would diminish California's power in the Electoral College. This means that California will only have 53 senators, which is only 19.5%. This decrease may seem small, but as the 2000s election showed, presidential races can be very close. In tight races, the predominantly Republican Jefferson might give a Republican candidate an edge over a Democratic one, and thus score a Republican victory. So, if somehow Jefferson did become a state, not only would it take congressional power away from California, it would also give Republicans an advantage over Democrats. Democrats might see the addition of Jefferson as a threat to their party. That fear might provoke Democrats to win more congressional power. After the admission of Jefferson, a Democratic-controlled House and Senate and presidency could push for the administration of Puerto Rico. See, Jefferson and Puerto Rico are somewhat mirrored. Jefferson is mostly Republican, whereas Puerto Rico is mostly Democrat. Thus, if Jefferson was omitted, the admission of Puerto Rico may not seem as far-fetched as it does now. Instead of being seen as an unfair advantage, it may be talked about more as a balance of power. So, Maybe instead of 51 stars on the flag, there might be 52. But what do you think? How do you think Jefferson would change U.S. politics? I'd love to hear your opinions. Anyway, that's all for me. Bye.
2, 3, 4. State of Jefferson, state of mind. State of Jefferson, that state of mind. I fell on down that casket range and rolled through Scott Valley. This old man was a rambling on, he rambled night and day. He rambled night and day. Well, all the things that came across the porch and the laws, it'll give you all something to say. Give you all something to say. In state of Jefferson, state of mind.